The Middle East is a pressure cooker ready to blow, and recently the heat is rising. We'll dive into some of the biggest flashpoints you can't ignore. First is the chokehold tightening around Lebanon, demanding they finally disarm Hezbollah. Second, a massive drone threat is escalating daily on the Israel-Egypt border, with weapons pouring into Gaza. And finally, a bizarre turn in the Abraham Accords that could have massive consequences. Stick around, we're talking about Kazakhstan. And before that, I want to, as often I do, ask you to like, subscribe, share, comment, and all of those good stuff. The region is changing right before our eyes, and we've spoken about this in the past extensively, on the changes and the goals of the different parties, be it the US, Israel, Iran, Egypt, and so on. So today, let's leave the mag alone, mostly, and talk about the going-ons in the area. We'll start with Lebanon. In the past couple of months, every day Israel has been striking at Hezbollah operatives and infrastructure, all south of the Litani River. In other words, in violation of the ceasefire agreement signed with Lebanon and not Hezbollah, the Hezbollah has continued to arm itself and prepare infrastructures and reconstitute its forces. Sometimes the Lebanese government or president respond negatively to Israel. Other times, they affirm their commitment to disarm Hezbollah. Now, regarding disarming Hezbollah, there are U.S. soldiers stationed at Safed. When Israel has information on violations of the ceasefire, those soldiers pass the information to their U.S. counterparts in Beirut, who then pass on the information to Lebanon. From that point on, it is Lebanon's job to deal with it. And based on the information available, they do so at about a 60% success rate. The 40% they don't deal with are when the arms or terrorists are within private homes, and they have made the choice not to break into the homes to deal with the weapons and terrorists there. And this is due to the national trauma in Lebanon from the civil war that tore the country apart in the 70s and 80s. Consequently, in those 40% of cases, Israel has to step in. Nevertheless, so far it seems that the ceasefire is holding, despite the Hezbollah violations and Israel's need to respond. Despite the Lebanese army's desire to disarm Hezbollah and its partial success in doing so. And the most interesting updates of the last 2 weeks or so are that Joseph Aoun, the president of Lebanon, has spoken multiple times about the need to negotiate with Israel. And the US has stated that those negotiations will be direct and not through intermediaries. Additionally, very strong hints were passed that Saudi and Emirati funding for rebuilding Lebanon would be delayed until after Hezbollah is disarmed. So we have both Israeli military pressure, US political pressure, and Arab financial pressure on the Lebanese government to step up to the plate. We will see how that develops. Last but not least, there is a report last week that UNIFIL, United Nations Intervention Force in Lebanon, shot down an IDF drone that it received orders to continue doing so. More on that in the future. Moving on to the Syrian region. Regarding the minorities there's nothing new with the Alawites in the northwestern coast. That is, of course, the ethnic group of former President Bashar al-Assad. And this obviously is not taken into account that a few months ago al-Jolani's forces bombed them, killing thousands. Regarding the Druze in the southeast, east of the Golan Heights, the ceasefire in Suweida is holding, although there are small clashes going on. For example, just a couple days ago, one of Jolani's soldiers was killed, and the hundreds of women and children kidnapped are still being held by the Sunni Bedouin forces allied with Jolani. Regarding the Kurds in the northeast, there is an update that the agreement to integrate them by making Kurdish a national language and giving citizenship to the displaced Kurds has stalled. We will keep an eye on all of that. Al-Jolani himself, that is President Mahmoud Ashara, after being removed last week from the UN's persona non grata list, in other words, being a terrorist dictator, with the European Union saying it would follow suit, is now officially invited to the White House to meet Trump. It is presented as an opportunity for security arrangements, but we will see if it develops into something related to the Abraham Accords. And speaking of the Abraham Accords, last week, Donald J. Trump announced that, and then it was followed by an official announcement from within the country, that Kazakhstan will be joining the Abraham Accords, the first country to join during Trump's second term. Now, to be fair, Kazakhstan has had diplomatic ties and a diplomatic presence within Israel since 2013. So it's by no means as revolutionary as when the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Sudan, which Israel was at war with, Bahrain, and Morocco joined. Nevertheless, hopefully it will be the first of many, and more relevant ones will follow, such as Indonesia, Pakistan, and so on. Let's quickly look at Egypt. For years, the border between Israel and Egypt has been used to smuggle drugs, weapons, women, and illegal workers, and so on into Israel, and it has been mostly ignored. Recently, the Bedouins in the Sinai and their counterparts in Israel have upgraded their capabilities and have started using fleets of drones multiple times a day to transport weapons and drugs. And a lot of it ends up in the hands of Hamas in Gaza, but also of crime families in Israel. As a result, Defense Minister Israel Katz ordered that the army start figuring out how to stop these aerial incursions and develop the means and be firmer on the matter. Now, if that gets translated into action or not, time will tell. But in the last week, there have been about 4 or 5 reports of intercepted drones. And just so it's clear, Israel is still being wishy-washy on pointing the finger at Egypt. They are not calling out Egypt for being lax on the criminal terrorist elements operating from within its borders. Moving on to Turkey. Turkish officials recently published about 40 arrest warrants for Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Chief of Staff, and many other generals and high-ranking officials. I'm not sure what effect, if any, that will have on traveling around the world, besides the obvious don't go to Turkey. But in any case, this is not how an ally should act. I think they're a little upset that we don't want them involved in security forces and coordination in Gaza. Speaking of Gaza, it's worth updating that despite the unbearably slow pace, Hamas is continuing to trickle hostage remains back. Currently, 5 hostages remain still in Gaza, 2 soldiers, 2 civilians, and 1 foreigner. And today, at 2 p.m., shortly after this was filmed, Hamas said it will return the remains of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, who has been held in Gaza for years. Additionally, there are 100 to 200 Hamas fighters trapped in tunnels in Rafah, in Rafah. There is talk in Israel about letting them go with their weapons back to Hamas-controlled territories. This talk, of course, is madness and defeatist. So far, Israel is offering them the option to surrender or die, but isn't doing much to bring that about. Hamas is calling on negotiators to act to free them or risk the ceasefire collapsing. Last but not least, let's go way out to Iran. While I could spend an hour going into details, it is enough to say that 1. They are continuing to build up their army, buying planes, producing missiles, building new secure sites to continue their nuclear ambitions, and selling oil. This last month, they sold more oil than any month since 2018. But on the other hand, it seems that they're also suffering from massive shortages, for example, drinking water. And I won't leave you in suspense regarding the mag. On Friday she was released. On Sunday she tried, or faked, killing herself again, which begs the question, why her phone was not taken when the charges came up? Why she wasn't arrested for an entire week? Why she wasn't investigated thoroughly while she was arrested? Why she was released without supervision after her first fake suicide attempt? And the obvious answer is that she's protected and her cronies are running the show. More on that next time. So for now, once again, I want to ask you to pray for Israel, pray for its leadership, pray for the soldiers, the families of the hostages, and for us here at Netivyah. God bless you all, and shalom.